So I'd just like to take a moment and actually welcome Dr. LeoCeli as our next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks for making it back. This is usually the worst time to give a talk is after lunch, and I'm not sure why I got assigned to this particular spot. But I would like to make a confession. I also am an intensivist, an ICU doctor, so sorry about that. But I'm going to start off with a quote from Arnold Relman. He was the former editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, and he passed away last summer. And he said that many people think that doctors make their recommendations from a basis of scientific certainty, that the facts are very clear, and there's only one way to diagnose or treat an illness. In reality, that's not always the case. Many things are a matter of conjecture, tradition, convenience, and habit. This is a photo of Vinod Khosla. As you're aware, he's a venture capitalist from Silicon Valley. He's one of the few who invest a lot of money in healthcare. And he was interviewed once, and he was asked, what was it that surprised you the most about learning about U.S. healthcare in the U.S.? And he said that what surprised him the most is how bad it is. And he goes on to describe this research where they had approached 40 cardiologists from across the country. They gave them a detailed case about a patient with a heart condition. And there was only one question at the end of the case. Are you going to recommend open heart surgery to the patient or not? And there was no consensus. The split was 50-50. Half of the cardiologists said that this patient needs an open heart surgery, and the other half said no. And that's not the worst part of the research. They went back to the same cardiologist 2 years after, and 40% changed their minds. So this report is already 3 years old. It came out of the Institute of Medicine, and it's been reported earlier in the morning, where they looked at the cost of healthcare, I believe in 2005, and they estimated that there are 30 cents for every dollar spent in healthcare that is wasted. And people actually think that that's an underestimation. And one of the reasons that they cited for why is there such a big waste in healthcare is that, for the most part, we still don't know what works best for which patient and in which clinical context. 2 years ago, the Institute of Medicine again published a report making the case for continuous learning from routinely collected data as a result now of the implementation of electronic health records. There's another issue that has not been brought up this morning, and that is the issue of the unreliability of published research. Over the last few years, the top journals are highlighting, including Science, Nature, British Medical Journal, The Lancet, and even The Economist, have been highlighting the discordance between the amount of money being invested in the biomedical research enterprise and the reliability of published research. And the problem is actually twofold. The first is the unreliability of what's being published, and second is that we don't have any access to the research that is not being published. And this is a crucial issue because the whole idea of quality improvement really depends on research. Quality improvement is nothing but trying to implement what is evidence-based. And how can we proceed if there's not a whole lot of evidence in a lot of the things that we perform in day-to-day care? In the last few years, there has been a movement that's been sweeping almost every industry, including the specialized domain of healthcare, and that is open data. It calls for data sharing, and by its very nature, it calls for an accountability and a collaboration across disciplines that's never been seen before. So I come from a laboratory at MIT, and we have built and are maintaining MIMIC. So MIMIC is a database of patients admitted to Beth Israel Deaconess to all their intensive care units, not just the medical ICU, but all the different types of ICU. And we have collected data from 2001 to 2012. And we did something radically different at that time. So this was released in 2003. We de-identify the patients, and we release it to the public, and it's open access. And it's really a low barrier to obtaining access to this database. All you have to do is to do the certification to be able to work with human subjects, and then you sign an agreement that you are not going to try to re-identify the patients. And we have been around for 10 years, and knock on wood, there has not been any breach of of data privacy. And we have brought together clinicians as well as data scientists in order to try to use the database to answer questions that we encounter in day-to-day practice. The types of research that have come out of MIMIC are in several categories. I will highlight a couple of them. The first is comparative effectiveness research, and we know that it is not as simple as it sounds, using an observational, a retrospective data to be able to figure out which treatment works best for which patient and at which specific clinical context is not going to be very easy. And that's the reason why we're trying to recruit more methodologists, more machine learning experts from MIT, from the School of Public Health, to work with the clinicians, because these are the types of research that cannot really be performed in a prospective trial. You cannot look at the value of each intervention for every patient subset, for every clinical context, because it's just going to be very expensive. The other type of research that we have been pushing for is pharmacovigilance. We have been trying to look at long-term effects of medications. Again, these are very difficult to detect in an open randomized, in a prospective randomized controlled trial, because most of the time the trials are limited. So in this particular study, we try to look at what is the impact of being on antidepressants when you come to the ICU. This type of study cannot be done prospectively. You cannot randomize patients to different SSRIs and follow them over 10 years and see which patients get admitted to the ICU to see if there's any potential interaction between being on antidepressants and critical illness. I'm trying to make a case now for using big data to improve quality. But before that, I wanted to stand back, because to a certain degree, there is still no clear, universally agreed upon definition of healthcare quality. Multiple definitions exist from different organizations, from the CMS, from the Institute of Medicine, from WHO, and they represent the values of the organization. This study was highlighted earlier in the morning. These are 4 organizations that rate hospitals according to their quality, and the study that came out last month, authored by some of the biggest names in quality improvement, found that there's really a lot of discrepancy between the rating organizations in terms of the performance of the different hospitals across the country. And it highlights that there is still a lot of room to improve the way we measure quality. And that's a recurring theme from this morning. What I wanted to do now is to decompose quality into 3 different elements. And the challenge is to come up with a system that will leverage digital data to be able to continuously measure quality in real time and provide some actionable items. And that is really the goal of quality improvement. The first element of quality that I wanted to emphasize is the application of evidence-based interventions to individual patients every single time. Sounds easy, but it's not. As you know, a lot of the guidelines for practitioners come from population-based studies, and they are very difficult to translate to individual patients. And that is because of heterogeneity of treatment effect, as well as treatment-treatment interaction. And also, a lot of the population studies don't even stand the test of time. This is a paper that came out of the NIH just looking at the reversal in practice as a result of evaluation of standard of care. As a result of not having evidence for a lot of the things that we do, we are only measuring quality in specific diseases such as acute myocardial infarct, ARDS, sepsis, and in very specific components of care, measuring time to antibiotics, time to balloon, or time to early resuscitation in sepsis. And clearly, those are just a small fraction of the interventions that we perform in healthcare. All the others, there's not a whole lot we can do in terms of evaluating whether they're appropriate or not. This is one system that we had talked about in the previous application. It might be an option for the different aspects of care that there is no evidence that exists. We had termed it dynamic clinical data mining. And in this system, what it does is it aggregates and catalogs every patient encounter through their patient records, and then it will try to query a universal de-identified database using real-time search engine technology. What we will try to do is to identify patients of sufficient similarity to the index patient that you have in front of you, so that it could be helpful in the way you make decisions, and hopefully come up with recommendations as regards treatments and tests, as well as prognosis based on the outcomes of similar patients in the database. Again, it sounds easy, but it's not. Our colleagues at Stanford have described a similar system, and they have called it the green button. The second element of quality that I'm challenging the audience in terms of coming up with a digital system to quantify is the element of compassion, good patient-provider communication, and shared decision-making. At present, the way we are measuring this is through patient satisfaction survey, and people are probably familiar with Press Ganey, which has a monopoly of measuring patient satisfaction. But we're also aware that it's not as simple as that. This study came from the UC Davis health system, whereby the authors looked at close to 52,000 patients, patient satisfaction, and linked that with patient outcomes. And they found that the most satisfied patients are also the most expensive patients. They tend to use healthcare more often, even compared to other patients of similar disease and clinical context. And what's worse is that they have a 12% chance of being admitted to the hospital, and also a higher risk of mortality. So what the bottom line statement, I think, is that the patient's perception of quality is colored by whether or not their expectations were met, and that managing expectations goes hand in hand with building trust. And this is really where compassion weighs in. But how do you measure compassion? How do you objectively capture compassion during the patient-provider encounter? The last element of quality that has been alluded to over and over again in the morning is this element of teamwork and quality of culture. And this is where every member of the system, healthcare provider or not, is contributing and is really accountable for improving processes and committed to learning. Patients kind of take this a little bit for granted. This is not as obvious to them when they come in to seek care. But we would argue that this would impact outcome more than a lot of the things that we do. At present, teamwork and culture of quality is not really rated by any national organization that measures quality. We've also talked about the development of a learning healthcare system. More and more experts believe that that should not be a vision for what quality should be, but it should be a crucial element of this quality that we are measuring. And these are some of the elements of a learning healthcare system with respect to quality. It's been discussed earlier, but I just wanted to point them out. One is that it could track quality continuously real time, not just using EHR data, but other types of data as well. And this is in contrast to what most of the time being done now, which is episodic retrospective quality reports. It would provide actionable items at the point of care, and it would automatically feed into pragmatic quality improvement research. There are challenges, and we've talked about this during the morning, so I would quickly read this quote from Ni Viragi. Electronic health record vendors have taken patient data hostage and are not willing to release it unless they receive a big ransom. They typically claim that technical problems limit the interoperability of their products. This is like saying T-Mobile that your users cannot make phone calls to people who have AT&T. And obviously we should not believe that claim. The big issue that I encounter whenever I talk about big data is that is big data going to give you bigger problems? And we are very aware that that is a real possibility. There are multiple biases that exist. This is just one paper looking at the biases in the 17 million publications in PubMed, and they've mapped the different biases that you could actually see by reading those articles. So what we have done last year is to convene a critical data conference and datathon at MIT. During the datathon, we brought over 100 data scientists and clinicians, not just doctors, but we have nurses and pharmacists there working hand in hand with data engineers and data scientists, primarily from MIT. And together, they use the MIMIC database to try to answer some questions that they meet in their practice. During the data conference, we asked some thought leaders from academia, from industry, as well as from the research enterprise to really tackle the challenge and pitfalls of big data. We were lucky to have Jeff Drazen and John Unitas to be our keynote speakers. As you know, they are in the polar extremes. So Jeff Drazen is the poster boy for biomedical research, and John Unitas is the biggest critic of biomedical research. And we asked them what they think about the data revolution that is sweeping healthcare. And these are the take-home points of that data conference. The value of large amounts of data hinges on the ability of researchers to share data, methodologies, and findings in an open setting. And if empirical value is to be had from the analysis of retrospective data, a more continuous peer review must be created by groups working together on similar problems. We think that the solution to this problem of unreliable research is not just opening your data and opening the methodologies, but there needs to be a stronger sense of collaboration among the different investigators. And with that, I am going to conclude my presentation. Thanks.